I think a brief intro for that every episode will be useful because obviously people will hopefully just do it just one episode and then put it on.
That's how we do it. This I'm not going to say it's a good one, but maybe it's one. It's either a turn off or a turn on one. So, too afraid to ask, too afraid to Google. Welcome to No Idea Yet, where we ask those questions and try to answer them. And then for a second part, we go away and see if we actually know what we're talking about. So, for today's topic, it is sports. And I am Jonathan, the host, and we have Freddie.
Hello.
And Alistair.
Hello there.
And let's get into it. So, the thing about sport, I'm not actually going into any specific sport.
Are you joking? We're doing the entirety of sport. Oh my god.
All of sport. No. So it links in a bit to hobbies. So I used to work at B&Q, and when we were in the canteen, and the question arose, is that a sport or is that a hobby? And what's the difference between a skill and a sport? Because is pool a sport? Is darts a sport? Golf?
Yeah, you're talking to Alistair.
I know. Alistair's an avid snooker player. But like golf, when you think sport, you think energy, exercise, football, physical exertions, possibly team sports, and then snooker or archery. And it's like, well, it's a skill, 100%, but is it a sport? And so my
archery is in the Olympics, mate.
No, I like archery.
We won't jump in straight away, but
so my question to you guys is, what is the definition of a sport?
I'm pretty sure if you go on BBC and then go on their BBC Sport bit and then you scroll through the list of the activities they've got there, they're all sports. And other than that, no, not a sport. That's the definitive.
Freddie?
Sport obviously breaks down to sports that people do on their own or as a team. Generally, it's against either another person or a team. So there's got to be some sort of...
What about discus, throwing discus? That's just about getting your personal record, isn't it? Or weightlifting?
Nah, because you're against other people who are also trying to throw objects distance, right? Weightlifting is a sport, I think.
Is it competition?
I've heard people say that athletics is a sport and everything else is just a game.
Oh, I never heard of that. I do like the idea of the skill versus, is there a sport? So, when you go to a beach and you thingy rocks and you skip them, skip rocks, skimming. I've seen videos of people, going to those slate quarries that have been filled with water. So it's perfect rock. It just looks so satisfying. And I think they have competitions, right? Mm-hmm. So are all competitions sports?
So I think, just thinking then, it was like, is it because it has to be competitive? Because how could it not be? Is that what constitutes a sport? Just anything that's competitive?
I think the competitive element is a key factor. I think there are quite a few different things you're going to have to bring together to can I say something definitively is or isn't a sport? Like, what about esports? Where do they fall into?
Come on now, that was going to be one of my next questions. Where does esports? This on my thing is, where do esports come in?
Okay, well, we'll put. I think the Olympics is a really good place to go to as like a point of reference for this, because I think obviously there is a lot of thought that gets put in every 4 years about if a new thing is going to get included in the Olympics or not. And I think that's quite an interesting point of, is it a sport? Therefore, like this, I think in 2020 it was supposed to be, I believe, bouldering and maybe BMX was
speed climbing.
BMX.
Yes, the speed climbing, the bouldering thing. That's
meant to have been on for like 5 years. 10.
Yeah, I think BMX has been there for quite a while. It was something else, but yeah, the bouldering I think is definitely one that they've added. But I can't see darts or chess being added to the Olympics anytime soon. But
all right,
again, they are. I'd argue that they are. They have a lot of the trappings of sports, but they aren't necessarily the same.
What are the trappings of sport?
Well,
got you there.
The problem, because you can have. I was thinking, right, at first, right, okay, maybe you have to have a number of points or some sort of system like that. And then I was thinking about how some points in some sports are subjective, right? I mean, it's not subjective. Okay, you get goal line technology if a ball goes in the goal, but it is subjective when you have dressage or you have how good someone is at diving into a pool. That's subjective points. So now I'm even more confused.
But they're both in the Olympics, so oh my god.
So it's fine. But yes, so do you think it's, because another point I was thinking, like, is it because it's just an activity, it's something that's playable? Like, is a sport because you can play it? I guess to use that kind of terminology.
Can you play jumping in a pool? Chess is playable, but
it's a thing of like, and what constitutes a sport versus just a skill? Because I think, are we coming to the conclusion that maybe it's competition is what constitutes a sport?
I think there's definitely an element of that. You've got to have a competitive element, and the physical exertion, I think, obviously varies from sport to sport.
But what about poker?
I think that's something that people care about. Yeah, so I don't think that's a sport. I think that's a game.
But
profession.
But therefore, it can't just necessarily be competition, then, can it? Well, I guess it's gambling, but do you know something like or dominoes?
So it's definitely
sports may not necessarily just be competition.
No, there's more. There's more to it. There's a bit more nuance to it than that, I think.
Wait, go, Alistair, explain.
I was saying I don't think I do agree that I don't think darts and snooker things are the same. But actually, no. I come at it from a different angle. I think one thing that the sport maybe needs to have, especially if it's going to be a successful sport, is the spectator element. It needs to be entertainment, and like I would argue, darts and snooker definitely are that. They're obviously they're not in the same league as football and other sports like that, but they can provide entertainment to people. I think that's a big part of the sport.
But could you say that's mainly because they've become that because of enthusiasm? Because it is with anything of like, someone will watch snooker, sorry, Alistair, and be like, this is so dull and so boring. Or darts, and maybe it's because only like
I'm not a wedding guy.
But it's only personal interest. So it's kind of like you say, oh, it has to be enjoyable, like a spectator sport. But is that more of something which is it became something, and then it also happened to be, people get invested, so then it becomes spectator, not necessarily. So it doesn't necessarily start spectator. Or are you saying that for a sport?
If you're going to start a new sport, then obviously it's going to be difficult to like say it's a sport straight away, because if no one has ever even heard of it. But I mean, so where would you guys put Quidditch onto that? Bear in mind it's a thing that people actually do now.
Oh no, Freddie just left the chat.
Freddie's just disappeared and messages carry on.
That does carry on. No, well, come on, we'll have a little one-off. But yeah, Quidditch, because that's like a brand new one.
It's a bizarre one, obviously, because the universities play it, and it's a thing. Like there's competitions, and it has all the trappings again of a sport that you play. But then it's like it literally was just made up by J.K. Rowling. It's got no foundation in it.
Yeah, fully.
Sports were all made up. The first guy to invent rugby was invented here. Like I said, I think the UK very good at inventing sports, not so good at playing them. Yeah,
one thing is like the cheese rolling. Is that a sport? Because technically, someone can come first place and you can get the cheese. But does it make it a sport? And it's played yearly, and it is a spectators. People spectate the event.
I don't think the word sport needs to necessarily be that like sacred that we have to say, okay, cheese rolling isn't because it's not good enough, or I feel like people hold this kind of idea of sport needs to be this kind of I said this thing that's the Olympics or it's on TV and it has millions of people watching it. Like, does it need that? I'm not sure it does.
But yes, it does, Alistair. I'm just telling you now that it does. Otherwise, there's no point of having this whole conversation.
Doesn't even matter. Yeah,
no. Question. So if you're gonna have a Venn diagram and it's gonna have like skills and has a competition aspect, has spectators, what are all the circles where it crosses, where anything in that is a sport, or is it the other way around? We get backwards.
Because this is what I've written down, the first two of competition, spectate, and I'd say a skill possibly. It's got to be a skill in it as well, doesn't it? So competition, possible spectator, and a skill in itself.
Okay, now we've got to find something that doesn't fit any of those. That'd be funny. So hang on. So competition,
spectator,
and
skill,
or just entertainment. I think entertainment value.
Entertainment value. Yeah.
I got one, but that's just because I'm salty about it. Pretty much all humans. Okay, well, probably is just like upset. I said that's fair enough. Okay, a lot of people, unless they've unfortunately have some sort of difficulty, can run.
Mm-hmm.
Running on your own, or even those ultra marathon ones where there's just, it's like one person, they're on their own, no one's watching, no one cares, it's boring to watch, and they're out there. Very impressive, yeah, I get it. There is, I guess, skill to it, but the sense of running, it's more like ability, it's endurance, right? So what would you say?
It's an endurance task, isn't it? More so than necessarily a sport.
I actually just finished a book called Born to Run, and it's all about this Tamahurara tribe out in Mexico who are this like ridiculous running people. You might have heard of, I don't know, for sure there's a hell of a lot of skill in that, and it's kind of seen as a sort of, crazy, almost borderline masochistic kind of thing to most of society. But no, you definitely have that's definitely a sport. Like, ultra marathon running is 100%. It ticks enough of those boxes in that Venn diagram for me personally.
But I do part of me think, because it is like, say, running on your own, just I would say isn't necessarily a sport. But I appreciate obviously when you go into like any as soon as it comes to competition, it's a sport, isn't it? Whereas football is still sport even when you're not competing. Even if you just or is it not? Say if you're just playing like a game, is it a sport?
If you don't keep it in your back garden, I don't think that's necessarily a sport. But then going to the gym is not a sport, and yet
weightlifting.
Weightlifting is, then I mean that then becomes a cross-line. But go walk on a treadmill by himself. No one's going to say that guy's doing a sport right now.
It's the competition. It's not necessarily even the exercise part. It's the competition part. You're doing it on your own just for the sake of it, for either a game or exercise, doesn't count as a sport until you add somebody else into the mix.
Yeah, I think because then you're practicing, aren't you? Before it's
because the thing about esports, they're using the word sport, and I'm not saying they're not sports. I just think that they're completely, it requires a lot of potential teamwork or solo work and tactics and planning and skill and learning and a lot of stuff, which makes it a sport. It's just a completely separate category because it's all done through a different platform. You're not doing it through the platform of you in the world. You're doing it through platform of stuff online. I still think it's a sport. I think it's like separate.
Yeah, because it fills those boxes of competition, entertainment, and skill, but you don't actually need. Like FIFA, you're doing the exact same thing. You just personally aren't running. What you are doing is doing skills required to enact the sport in itself.
Yeah, I think the reason people have pushback against that massively is because it's just so new. Like in the way that anything that's that new, older generations will push back against. I think that's the main argument. Obviously, for us, three guys in our 20s talking about esports, pretty open-minded to it. I think we're pretty, all pretty fine with it. I think if our parents' generation were talking about this, they'd have a massive problem with it, and they wouldn't consider it a sport at all.
But is boxing sport?
Could you
boxing?
Because it's 1v1. The competition is to beat one another. What? Kind of. Yeah. I don't know if it's as much competition as it is more like.
How can you possibly argue boxing's not a sport? It's so clearly a sport.
I'm just thinking because I'm thinking the sport.
Check the BBC listening. Check the this before you open your mouth.
No, I'm gonna go.
I'm looking forward to stranger. Hey, guys, I'm thinking squash, not a sport, because it's two people against each other. I mean,
tennis, yeah.
It's not a sport.
I think it's for me. If you think of all the kind of 1v1 sports, that it just seems a bit more. Yeah, I'm going to cut this bit out. I've got nothing.
Follow my train of thought here. Okay, so you've got normal inverted commas sports, which could be ranging from dressage to mountain climbing to again football, right? In the real world, kind of, you're doing it with your body. Then you've got alternate branch, you've got esports, where you're using your brain a lot as well, and yes, some skills, but there's a lot of the brain and coordination between you and your team. Right. Take away another one of those, and rap battles. You're using your brain.
I guess you could say, like with diving or something, it's based on subjective, isn't it, of who wins or who doesn't win. Well, at the same time, it's probably also boxing. You do it through point base. I'm just.
What have you got against boxing?
Just say boxing. Rap battles is like boxing without using your hands, because you could say it's based on points of like who's got better lyricism or like you're able to hold a beat longer. Or...
I think, like I said, we're getting to the more niche stuff now. I think rap battles is a really good example of something that isn't really, but has a lot of the trappings of a sport. But I think that is one of the does cross the line away from a sport. I don't think necessarily. I think because again, it's got the entertainment value, but maybe it doesn't have that accessibility that.
Is it something which can be scored? Because if you think of everything ends up being scored, because how else do you compete? Like diving, they have numbers, even if it's like
you need a leaderboard, right? You need to have some sort of
yes. So
you can't have a record in a rap battle, like you could.
Yeah,
you could have the most people ever to get one. But
you'd have to have judges to be like, right, the reasons why we give you this number is why. Like dancing, is dancing a sport?
What? Yeah, but gymnastics, they do that in gymnastics. There's a one where the gymnasts stand in the corner, then they do their routine, and then the judges judge on how good those poor, like, abused little Russians have done their dance. And it's really cool. How can you not say rap battles? You know what? Rap battles are, or even spoken word performances against.
All right, simmer right down with spoken word. Rap battles fair play. Spoken word, no, mate. Not even close.
Yeah.
I can appreciate spoken word, but most of the time it's people who are just talking with pace. Just sometimes
poetry is like, mate. Poetry is like our sport, obviously.
it's not. Sometimes they're not even right. It just seems like they're just saying a nice little story or a sentence, and it's like, yeah, that's good. Sorry.
You sound like my dad talking about rap. Just
I think, yeah.
With music in the background.
Yeah, I think if they don't score rap battles, I'd say it's hard to know who actually won and why they won. You got to be able to explain why someone, who won the competition.
But if they scored them, then it could potentially be working its way towards a sport.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, would you say dance is a sport? Because even if you like ballroom, it's a competition, but do you still see it as a sport? Dance? Because gymnastics is because it's a whole field of sport, really. Whereas dancing, it's not in the Olympics. They do have world competitions, but is it just more of a field competition? Again, I've put that into with dancing / gymnastics. Is gymnastics a sport?
It's a pretty nice combo of the two. I think yeah, we're getting into a few things that aren't as categorically yes or no. But I think basically, I'm assuming there is a definition of sport which we haven't looked up yet. But I believe that it's got enough it's a multifaceted thing with enough different kind of areas that you can kind of enough rings of this Venn diagram that you can kind of find things that do fit into quite a few of them, but that still don't really say it. I think maybe it could just be like a thing of ask 100 people, is this a sport, yes or no, and then that if more than half of them say yes, that kind of thing. Because it does actually, you see it and you think, is that a sport? Yes or no? Like we're just saying spoken word poetry. I don't think any of us are going to argue that is a sport. Rap battles, for me personally, no, but maybe for you guys, yes. I don't know.
I think no for rap battles unless they have a scoring system. But even then, it doesn't feel like a sport. But is that it? Is sport a feeling? I like to think that we're going to go away, look at the definition of sport, and be like, so I've written 4 points down: competition, entertainment, skill, and scoring. And it'd be like, nope, not even close. It is a boring definition. And like, but we don't know yet. That's it, isn't it?
We're going to try and think of something that fits those definitions, but isn't a sport, or at least doesn't fit those definitions and is a sport. Because I'm writing down now anything I can think of. And I can go down the lyric thing, like you have spelling bees. Is that that's judged and you have to do it correctly, right? There's a competition.
Yeah, it's a skill.
And then obviously the dancing stuff. And then I went down this other route, right? Okay. I was trying to think of something that wasn't words. So take out the kind of ick aspect of it. If you had like surgery as a sport, it's really, then I was like, maybe taxidermy could be a sport. If you like had to do it against other people and who had the better one, like
is Bake Off a sport?
Yeah, I was just saying, Bake Off is baking a sport. The pottery one, the sewing one.
It's competition, it's entertainment, it's scored, it's got skill in it, but they produce an item. So does it stop becoming a sport? Because I feel that's
they make it, but it's straight up in.
Go. Yeah. So like, is that it? Like, why is it that if you're creating something like the pottery ones, or are you bladesmithing?
Ice sculptures.
Ice sculpture. Yeah, sure. Why not? Ice sculptures too.
If it's a profession that you have to put the word competitive before it for it to become a sport, then it's not really a sport. Like if you have to say competitive baking, competitive ice sculpting,
competitive
if it's going to be a hobby that.
What's the difference between boxing and baking? That's what I'm trying to tell you.
But Mary Berry in the ring.
Boxing.
Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood batting it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you're saying, like if it's a profession, but like boxing's a profession, and that was started off as a hobby.
Oh my God! Leave
someone.
Boxing alone.
I'm not leaving. That's going to be on my go-to for being of boxing's a sport. But I'm going to compare it to everything to say why is baking?
Because my hobby is being people.
Yeah, excuse me. Do you do boxing or do you do competitive boxing? Oh no, I just beat them up. It's just normal boxing.
I just like getting drunk and just beat people up. Yeah.
Oh, you just remind me of another one. Competitive eating. People who do this eating.
That's not grating. That's the opposite.
That's
destroying.
But
for me personally, if you just competitive eating, that kind of does have more of the trappings of a sport. Enough for me to say, yeah, I think it's a sport.
So for next is actually to find the definition of sports and to see something of like.
We've got a week to Google what is a sport.
And then this was a rushed episode. Like, man, at the start I was like, I thought I'd have a lot more content than we started with, but we quickly just went through it all. And the other one would be like find the most bizarre sport, or try to find something which is technically a sport, but you kind of don't agree with it and kind of explain why. So like,
underwater cycling exists.
Is that a sport?
Underwater cycling exists. But apparently, there's the chess boxing that I mentioned. That's sport. We did this in an English lesson I gave. I tried to find the weirdest sports. Obviously, England's cheese rolling always pops up. Oh wait, have you heard of this ball game? Basically, there's a giant leather ball, and it's between two towns. Have you heard of this?
Oh, maybe.
So basically, you got to get the ball has to get into the other goal. The goal is like 3 miles away, and it's mass, and it's like it's not even a goal. It's like an area of another town. And the rules are there are no rules. You just have to get the ball there. Like people get really injured.
Yeah.
And then whichever town wins then gets to keep the ball into next year or something.
Right. So yeah, to go away, it's not going to be a long episode next week. I've wasted my opportunity of this podcast. Yeah, so the main thing is definition of sport. Find out what you can about it.
I've had this discussion a few times with people. I think it's a fun one to do.
And then find a bizarre sport. So that's it for this first part, and we've got a lot to research. And really, I just don't know how we're going to fit it all in one second part of the show. So thank you for listening. We'll see you in a week, and you'll see us in 5 seconds. Hello, and I would like you to welcome us back to the show. It's been 2 seconds for you and a whole week for us. So the questions I asked you before we went away was, what is the definition of sport? Is darts a sport? And then just a bizarre sport you may have found. And some little extracurricular ones I may have asked you were, is sports bad? And who decides what a sport is? First we'll go for definition. Alce, do you have a definition of sport?
I mean,
I have a definition.
Only the one that you sent. I mean, yeah, I've got the one that.
Well, yeah. I'll do the ones that I found. So, the Oxford definition of a sport is an activity involving physical exertion and a skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. And the GAISF, the Global Association of International Sports Federation, their rules for it are: it should include an element of competition, should not rely on any element of luck specifically integrated into the sport, shouldn't be judged to pose an undue risk to the health and safety of its athletes or participants, shouldn't be harmful to any living creature, shouldn't rely on equipment provided by a single supplier. And the Encyclopedia of World Sport, it's a competition between 2 or more people, rules to determine who's the winner. The primary goal is victory. The victory is determined by a relative physical ability of competitors. Strategy and chance may also play a role. So that's kind of, so the previous ones that we were going on about, I think we got some stuff. Like go back to
Wikipedia. All right, let's just go for the one true.
We got competition, entertainment, skill, scoring. So we kind of did it. There's competition. It partly entertainment, has to be skill in it, and scoring is.
Yeah, you know what we missed out completely? We just did an entire episode on animal welfare. But yeah, no, I do agree. You know, yeah, humans kind of need to be in it. I think. I don't really care.
Well, because I went to Wikipedia and the same thing. It covered all these points. But the Wikipedia was like one massive sentence because it had to encompass if it's an activity or games, if it's casual or organized, if it's to maintain, improve, or use an ability or skill, and the enjoyment is the enjoyment of the participants or the spectators. All of that is in the first sentence of the wiki, and I was like, wow. I mean, no wonder we struggled.
Yeah. A little fun fact I found out is that tug of war used to be an Olympic sport.
I have that same fact.
That's one thing I actually noticed quite a lot. Definitely, the Olympics gets mentioned a lot in terms of as like a kind of benchmark, if you like, of sort of, because it's not like if it's not the Olympics, it's not a sport, but it's kind of like if it's in the Olympics, it definitely is a sport.
It's a proper sport. So Freddie, carry on. So we've now discussed definition. So Freddie, you can say who decides what sport is.
Very beautifully into what I wanted to talk about, which was the Olympics. And so the Olympics is only an example of what makes sport, but like you said, it's something that says if someone says it's an Olympic sport, it's pretty big deal. But the Olympic Committee, first of all, they have to deem a sport, right? This is the International Olympic Committee have to recognize your pathetic game as a sport. So this includes bowling and chess, but they are not Olympic sports, because then later on, the next group of probably white old men in a room decide that it's either a sport, a discipline, or an event. Now, what's also very strange is that I don't really understand their categorizing. So triathlon, do you reckon it's sport, discipline, or event?
Sport, because it's got like competition, physical things, whatever.
Without your definitions of what they are, I'd be leaning towards event potentially, but obviously I think it is a sport because it's got, like I said, it's got that competitiveness and everything else. And it is a
correct.
Sport.
Correct, it is sport. Okay, next one. Pole vault, sport, discipline, or event?
Part of a sport, right? It's part of a. I don't know. It's within athletics. Is that
against
what kind
others.
of makes the discipline?
Yeah, I'd say sport. Still against others, competition and physical. To be.
No, it's an event. Apparently, it's a track and field event.
Oh.
I mean, that was not the right line to make.
Last one.
Of those three, we got the two other ones. Nice.
Okay, I've got one more.
Yeah.
Women's wrestling. I don't know why, but women's wrestling particularly. Sports discipline.
I hope that it should be the exact same as men's wrestling.
I know, right?
I'm assuming men's wrestling is a sport.
It's discipline. Oh, sorry, I've just read it. Oh,
okay.
sadly.
I was going to say. Tip of my tongue, mate. Tip of my tongue, of course.
Can't prove otherwise.
Yeah.
Wait, so how is it a discipline? It seems really...
I have no idea. I got really confused.
Well, for women, it's really a discipline compared to men, where it's just a sport. They have to take off their long dress and stop writing things and having soft hands.
Well, imagine if they're like, it's an event, like, because, you know, women doing something out of the ordinary is an event.
She came out of the drawing room and wrestled.
Yeah, so I don't know. So then to further this, once it's been confirmed as one of those three, then, right, if it's a male sport, it has to be played professionally in 75 countries across 4 continents.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
What about women? Do you reckon women's is the same? More countries, fewer countries?
I'm assuming less, just because I think we're still in this catch-up period for a lot of women's sports.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hope fewer, but because obviously that makes it more accessible, right? But
yeah, because I feel like some countries,
it was like yeah,
Saudi, they just not have a sport for women.
Yeah, they don't play this enough in Antarctica, so not going to happen.
Oh yeah, no, imagine if it said all the continents. Yes, you're right. It has to be played by 40 or more countries across 3 continents. So, I mean, I agree. Like, women's that sport is less accessible around the world, but it seems, I don't know, it's just such a weird thought. I never thought, how many countries you'd have to play a sport. And I'm wondering how many countries don't have certain sports for women at all.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say for football, for like women now, they're starting to kind of see a similar kind of wage as male players. And it's just taken so long to get there. So that's for being first world country. So, and like very, trying to be more of an equal kind of society, let alone other countries which are like 20 years in the past. Well, 50. I don't know.
Okay, no, I was just going to, as a quick throw into this, because it's kind of it's just more of a general point, if you like. But obviously, the semantics of it, I didn't realize. Obviously, it's got real world applications, like we were just talking about there, with with wage inequality and all sorts of real world applications. But just the semantics of like, is something a sport or not, seems sort of a bit almost arbitrary in my head when we were talking about it last week. It's just so heavily debated, and so like vehemently, like this is my thoughts, like this is what I think. I don't. Anyway, that was sort of thing that kind of came up. I surprised a bit, which I thought tried him. Sorry, Freddie. Back to your last.
No, like this is open discussion. I want to hear what you say.
But that was a bit. That just came up really for me. Was just like, why is that people taking this really, really seriously? Like even in that article you were talking about with the bridge association going all up in arms over like whether or not bridge was a sport. It's like, of course it's not, but who cares? I mean, people who play bridge, I guess. But.
I feel like there's a lot of echoes with languages. For example, there are people who decide if a language is a language. I mean, that would enrage groups, obviously, especially if you want to have independence. That is a big importance. So I feel like the same kind of vibe is for sports as well. Like, if you have a sport that's very important to your group or society, and people say it's not a sport.
And let's not forget of like when you're competing at a world table as well for like anything of like if you may have dedicated a life to a certain type of sport, spent loads of money on it, and some said, yeah, it's not a sport, and it'd be like, well, no, but we've got like I was reading something about like some ultimate frisbee in Ireland and being like, it's really hard to get anywhere with it, and we've all got to spend our own money to do it. It costs a fortune. And someone be like, in America, it's like there's a big league for it. It just seems like in Ireland there isn't. Where in America you may even be able to get paid for it or get sponsors, whereas obviously depending on what country you're in, can be you're just completely disadvantaged.
My last point on this part of it, and then we'll see, is just that the final category is no mind sport, and that's why chess is now not in the Olympics, and no machine propulsion. So that's another reason why any of those aren't in the Olympics. So this intrigued me. I thought machine propulsion, and then I suddenly fell down a huge hole of the Special Olympics and Paralympics. But I think I'll see what Alistair's got first, and then I'll tell you all the fun stuff I found out. I mean, some crazy stuff about the things people do in the Paralympics and Special Olympics. So I was just going to ask Alistair what you found.
So an overarching point kind of after my research on it was that it's still sort of like the societal values around a sport and all of the kind of the how it stands and what it means to people is what really brings something from being like just not recognised as one to being recognised as one. I think obviously like I said, when people come together, when there's that entertainment side, when there's that competition, it's all when it comes into it. But like I said, the thing that really got me was this how vehemently people were arguing for or against something being a sport, like the whole thing of like the article that Johnny sent about bridge and darts, which I can touch on a little bit if you want, because it was good timing. It was the Masters of Darts this week, which was quite entertaining.
How would
it always is, of course.
It's
like a relatively.
Were they used allowed to drink when they played the actual proper darts? I feel like,
like back in the day, yeah, for sure. But
yeah, so like we televised
not
people
like recently
having beer and throwing darts, and I think that's just such like authentic. Where do you play darts? In the pub? Yeah, the official competition. You're still at a pub effectively. Like,
I mean, the most obvious thing for I think darts and is the sort of comedy of it, if you like, is just that. Look at the average dart player. He is not an athlete. It's not even close. It's a bloke you'd see down the pub, and like obviously there is no. I mean, well, to be fair, actually, the world number one at the moment he's an ex-rugby player who's in decent shape, but he's definitely the exception that proves the rule there.
Sorry,
sure. Quick side note, add this if you like, I don't know, but about the language, and I thought this was really interesting. Difference between a language and a dialect. Well, obviously, there's quite a lot, but one of the easy ways to think about it is that a language has an army, as in like if a country has a language, whereas obviously the dialects within them could be just as different linguistically, but it's all about the politics of it. Anyway,
wait, you can't. Wait,
just
a language
drop that,
has an army.
A language has an army, so like you could have two things that are like. So I think the example was Norwegian and Danish. Maybe I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that was right. Those two are remarkably similar. Two people speaking Norwegian and Danish could have a conversation, no problem at all. But yeah, they're different languages, and then you could have, and obviously they've got different national borders, and they've got an army as it were. But then you could have dialects that are crazy different that you'd never be able to communicate in, but they're just dialects within one language. Oh, that's quite interesting.
The whole separate podcast. I'm excited.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, was it a case of doing like you've got language as an army, as in like American British may commonly team up in a war because they speak the same language. Same with like I don't know, maybe Portugal or Brazil. I mean, that's probably a far stretch, but it's just because there's two countries with the same language. Or was it more of a case of like North Wales and South Wales have completely different words for like window and grandma are completely different words in different parts of the same language? So it's kind of like you're having a battle between the same language. But
I think the point of it, I think the point of it was basically to say that the line between language and dialect has very, very little foundation in linguistics. I think that was the kind of the interesting kind of note on it. But anyway, sorry. The thing that also I liked about in my research of the sports is it's still quite subjective. There isn't like this is the definitive. Like there's a lot of people who have a lot of very strong opinions on it, but it's definitely there's no like this is the definitive answer. Obviously, there are the English Sport England and all these different like you said, all different. What's the word?
Organisations.
Yes, organisations as well. So thank you very much.
I mean, if you got the right people, and I'm talking, you just handpicked the correct people from around the world, inverted commas, and got them all to agree that me and only me putting a tea bag in a cup is an Olympic sport, and they put it through, then it is because they say so, right? I mean, there is an association or a group that make decisions on if a word is French, and they can decide a word is not French. There's a group of people who decide if a painting is or is not, or has not been painted by Monet. And there's a great show where basically a person found this sketch, and it matched something to do with other pieces that Monet made. It was noted in his book that he had done it, and it had paint bits that were from the right age and the right era, blah, blah, blah. And the committee were like, no, it's not Monet. They didn't want it to be, probably because it would lower the value of some other piece. I can't remember what it was. So they decided, because they decided so, that it was not painted by him. So I think sport is just another one of those. Some people say yes, some people say no, and that's all we have to go on.
Because definitely trying to look it up of what's the sport, and it's just came up with like, yes, different dictionaries say different things, but it wasn't like there's any regulating body to even say. It's like, yeah, but you're right. Some organisations will be like, yes, this is a sport that we participate in, but it's kind of like universities when they do a sport, or if they don't do, like MMU does dodgeball, but another uni may not do that sport, so it's just there's no rules.
So this is what I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. Like, do we need to have some sort of definitive answer? Yes, apparently, yes. So people on the internet think we do need to have a definitive answer on this for sure. But I mean, I say yes. So sorry to answer the questions you actually asked. So things that I was surprised that are a sport and aren't, and then sort of the ones that are more close to that line, right? So I think the main thing about the dance one, I would argue, is just it's a spectrum. Like, there are sports that are more physically active, and there are that are far less. So, dance is obviously at the very, very end of that spectrum in terms of, least physicality, which is fine. I think that's, but I think it does have all the trappings of entertainment and, the other stuff that makes it a good sport, and the competitiveness, obviously, and the pressure and, performance and everything else. And then other things that are kind of like, just a bit rogue, sort of like wife carrying and death diving.
Yeah.
Either of those two.
I got wife carrying too. And I love it. It's like the obstacle course needs to be 253.5 meters long. Your wife has to at least weigh 49 kilograms. If you drop her, it's 15-second penalty. And the prize is your wife's weight of beer. So there's that real toss between how fat do I want you to be when I do this? It's risk reward.
Well, I love it. It has to be your wife as well. Like, you can't
just marry someone random. Because
you know what?
Reasons to get married. That's up there as a reason to get married.
You'd be perfect for carrying,
But I feel like they've had single-sex relationships, haven't they? People participate.
That's cool.
It's not limited to male and female. I think they have had male and female, which is sick.
Oh, nice.
Or however
right. I thought only be as in like it still had to be wife. Oh, so the male. That's cool.
I found one of my fun sports that I can't believe I've got to play. It is called Bossa Ball, and it originates from Spain. Now, this is just one of those. We threw a bunch of other sports together and it made something. Okay, guys.
Wait, sorry, Bossa Ball or Bossa Bull?
Bossa Ball.
So
BOSSABALL.
Okay, Bossa Bull. I was thinking Bossa Bull, as in,
I mean, that's very Spanish. Yeah, but
yeah,
that would be very Spanish. This is a cross between volleyball, soccer, football, gymnastics, capoeira, and it's all done with a live DJ.
Just one really eclectic guy who's like, you know what? I want to use everything that I know.
It was a Brazilian band manager, apparently, who wanted to capture the late afternoon Brazilian beach vibe with an athletic grace and physical skill. And it just looks like chaos that I would love to participate in. It's got trampolines. The whole court's inflatable. It's got a huge net. It just looks awesome.
Do you fight as well if it's capoeira, or is it just you maybe use some of the moves from it?
I don't know, but I mean, maybe.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that's the one I found I most wanted to do.
A sport I did find was extreme ironing, and at first I was like, well, no, because it's not. How's it going to be a sport?
But the word extreme in front of it, anything's a sport.
It was like, how's it going to be a sport if it's not competition? And lo and behold, somebody got gold, silver, and bronze. I was like, right, okay, it's a sport then. Somehow you're able to. You're just doing ironing in a weird place, really. And I just don't know how you can compete with that.
Whoever gets the most wrinkles out, come on, man.
Is it the place that you do it that's the points, or is it how good you are actually at ironing?
Oh, and then like the last round, everything's linen.
Oh.
You have to get it to you have to iron it and get it to the judges' podium, unwrinkled still.
Just like climbing down a cliff.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Well, I mean, I don't know if you.
Freddie, did you have a bit more to add? You saying that?
I really do. But is this?
Yeah, let's dive into it. Yeah, so the Olympics thing, I said, it came up quite a lot for me. The one thing that I noticed is kind of interesting. The one that's the new sport apparently is coming in the 2024 Olympics is breakdancing, which my kind of knee-jerk response is, oh, that doesn't sound like a sport to me. So, and I know that dancing doesn't fall into a lot of those categories, which is, again, I think that one of the great sort of determining factors for it, which is just, again, it's a very subjective thing, but it's just kind of like your knee-jerk response of you hear it and you think, is that a sport? And then I say, for me, that breakdance, I'm like, oh, no, not really. But
dancing can be.
I'm not dissing, not trying to ostracize our breakdancing community who listen to this podcast, of course. But yeah, anyway, sorry. Fred,
no, but now I have another thing I wanted to say. Like, where does that knee-jerk reaction come from? Not of you, but of all of us. Why is it that we want to not be inclusive? Like, why is it that we're like, no?
Yeah.
I think it kind of falls into defining things in general, right? And why you need to feel the need to define things for being a certain way. Otherwise, if you just had a completely like blasé or whatever attitude to all of it, then it's, you need to have some lines to be able to talk about things. But I mean, all a product of your all sorts of.
But are we all at heart gatekeepers? Is this why? We're all
them.
We all have our special bubbles, and we want to make sure that nothing gets in that we don't allow in straight away, even if it could be totally acceptable thing. First, we're like, no, yeah, right, fine.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, you kind of right. Fair.
Yeah. Freddie, your final point you're gonna make?
Well, okay. Basically, just that I realised I didn't know anything about the Special Olympics, ni the Paralympics. So it seemed like a good time to learn something. I don't know if you guys know anything about it. I mean, I hadn't even thought about how they're different, actually. The Special Olympics being that. Actually, do you know the difference?
The Paralympics is once every 4 years with the Olympics, right? And the Special Olympics, I've never seen on TV or never seen at that kind of time of year. So, is it to do with physical or mental disabilities?
I was going to say mental for special and physical for para.
That's what I thought.
You're pretty close. So the Special Olympics, which originated in America in 1968, is mainly intellectual disabilities, right? So this is cognitive delay, significant learning or vocational problems that generally require special instruction in order to compete. So they have an oath: "Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt." And they chose the word special to demonstrate unique abilities. So they seem pretty cool. They have 27 sports ranging from badminton to figure skating to snowshoeing, which is, as it turns out, running in the snow with cool shoes on. So I thought that was cool. I couldn't find why they chose these specific sports. That was the problem. Shall I go on to Paralympics quickly?
Yeah, well, it's quite cool. The only thing I know of Special Olympics is Johnny Knoxville did a film of where he tried winning the Special Olympics or something like that. That's the only, and it's
fountain of all reliable and
just research. A Johnny Knoxville comedy. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely it originated in America. It's much more of a thing in America, but they fund basically lots of programs for being part. I mean, it's still all the Special Olympics if you're part of one of their committees or groups around the countries or around the country or countries. Rather than the Paralympics, which is actually, I guess, the quote-unquote official Olympics for those who have difficulties. That follows the other Olympics, the first Olympics.
I think it's called the Summer Olympics officially.
The regular. I mean, that's getting Paralympics, but fair enough.
No, I mean, sorry. The Olympics is the summer one rather than, and the Paralympics goes along with that, like the Summer Paralympics. But I assume they have a winter one as well. I don't know.
Yes, there is a Winter Paralympics which has 6 sports.
Huh. How many are in the normal Winter Olympics?
I don't know.
Because is that a lot 6 or is that not a lot at all? I have
6
no reference.
Not very much at all.
I'm going to Google that.
Yeah.
So I found out. How many sports do you reckon?
20.
Pastor?
24.
15.
Oh,
damn.
So you've got 9 less.
They're categorized into ice sports, alpine skiing and snowboarding events, and 10 million points to whoever can guess the last category.
Shooting.
Johnny?
Shooting, as Alistair said.
Nordic.
Oh. Oh.
Of course.
And then further into other categories, yeah, so it's ice sports, alpine, blah blah blah, and Nordic events. But yes, to finish, my last point was just that there are 6 winter sports in the Paralympics, 22 summer sports, and it started with British World War II veterans still wanting to perform and compete, but obviously having things like no legs and stuff hinders you. And they have a range of their disabilities, right? And they have these categories, and then you're subdivided within those categories to how
severe it is, right? So it's like how severe.
That's a better word. Yeah, and this is impaired muscle. There's one, range of movement limited is another, limb deficiency is another, visual is another, and the last is the intellectual. And of course, there has been a hell of a lot of cheating in the intellectual category, including the entirety of the Spanish Paralympic basketball team being fine within their mental capacities and all faking it, except 2 of them might have not been faking.
Oh wow!
That really begs the question of the whole. I think it's a quote from Cool Runnings when he's like, "If you're not enough without a medal, you'll never be enough with one." And like, if you have a gold medal is a wonderful thing, but if you're not enough without it, you'll never be enough with it. Yeah, I think that kind of rings a double true for pretending to say well for the Paralympics. That's funny.
Well, I have one last thing when Johnny shows this that it's just I had to share this crazy fact.
Yeah.
Well, Fred, I have one more point as well on the sports, just as one that's I don't know.
Okay, this is the last thing, just because I read it and I was like, God, I have to share this fact. So there is a problem within the Paralympics, and that is cheating. Now, the type of cheating that we have in maybe the original Olympics is something like blood doping, which also is a problem in Paralympics. But another problem is something called boosting. Now, boosting is when you cause trauma to your body to increase blood flow. And because some of these athletes have parts of their body they can't feel, this has resulted in some of them breaking their own bones before an event that they can't feel to boost their performance by up to 15%.
Whoa.
What?
Mad.
We're talking cutting or breaking bones or other injuries like tying up themselves really, really tightly, and it forces their blood into the parts of their bodies that do still function, and they boost their ability.
I mean, it just sounds like really smart and just also terrible.
I mean, it sounds like a dedication to your sport, but I guess if they can't feel it, it's not. But it's, I don't know.
My sister knew someone, and they, I think it was going up Snowdon or something in like a wheelchair, or I think their sister was going over there, and something that their foot got stuck under like the wheelchair for like the entire time, and it was just they broke like their shin in like 50 different places, complete like battered it, and he's like, can't feel it anyway, so just had it amputated. Kind of now I'm a bit lighter, and it was just so matter of fact. It's just like, yeah, okay, well, I couldn't feel it anyway, and it's just like, do you imagine like your foot just dragging the whole way? It's like, oh man. So do they get certain like pluses or minus due to their disability? Because I know you're saying about how they were affected physically, like the severity, but does that affect the scores? Because say someone who's got like, say I saw in the swimming once, someone had no arms and somebody had like one arm, like
that's like a whole. I was going to say a brief about that. So like the whole like structure of that, it must be quite interesting to actually get into. Like the people who decide this is, again, kind of what we were talking about with some people just decide certain things, and it's just like, well, that's kind of true of everything. But yeah, like there is like a blind guy against a guy with one arm, which is deemed on the same level of these shots, for whatever reason.
I don't know, just that they have categories within the categories. There's 10 actual eligible impairment types, and then within them are categories that I assume some sort of committee at some point.
I assume someone put some thought into it at some point down the line. I feel like and then just picking it out of the hat.
I kind of thought like maybe if you picture the whole human race kind of as aliens in your head, like just we're all aliens, we're all just a different thing. Generally, the Olympics is the people that compete out of everyone get into the final competitions, but the Paralympics, I guess, is more like we just don't allow that category of human, but we allow the other category just to compete within themselves, and it kind of Does that make sense? Because
yeah.
one of the categories is height limitation, and it's just people who are under heighted.
You've got a lower percentage of people who are actually able to participate in the Paralympics, so therefore the choice is different. It's a smaller pool because, for one thing, people who are disabled is a smaller percentage of the population who are not, and then within that percentage of disabled people will then be who are wanting to be athletes. So, like, if you think of the standard population and who want to be athletes, and then think of the disabled population and who want to be athletes. Yeah.
But I hope you don't mind me piggybacking off your thing, because I realized I just didn't know much about disabled Olympics. I still don't, but I found it very interesting to look into. And maybe
that's the beauty of what we're doing. That's the beauty of it.
Because I always think, I know somebody who you used to work with, and her daughter has a really rare telomere disease, which, telomeres, the ends of your chromosomes, and kind of like, as your cells replicate, they slowly start depleting. So
they bring over time.
Yeah, so her telomeres, or ends of her chromosomes, are like an 80-year-old's. So it kind of means, unfortunately, to have this really rare, like 1 in a million disease, the expected lifespan is about 16 years old, which is just devastating. But for her, she's a proper ambassador for the charity. She's done loads. She's talked with people all over the world and different specialists. And the same with anything with a charity, of more than likely, people don't do stuff for charities unless they've been personally affected, like cancer charities. Not as, you can bet that nearly everyone who works in a cancer research place has had somebody who's been affected by cancer in their lives, and that's one of the reasons they're doing it, or people who fundraise for charity. So it's good doing this because you're learning about stuff which actually, from a friend, she never would have even known about this charity, let alone be someone who's so actively involved in it. So it's nice to be able to kind of do stuff. You don't need to be affected in the same way to show light on it.
So that's the whole playing hand you dealt right and making the most of it and everything. I think. But one thing that came out as well, I think the obviously the Invictus Games, which was a whole, like, Prince Harry really, I think I actually came up last week. But yeah, linking it around. But yeah, the Invictus Games is that sort of I think it's like the Paralympic Games, but for army veterans, I believe, who like Freddie, how they originally came into the Paralympics. There's definitely a link there, but I think again might have to look it up a bit more. But I believe Jiffy made a video on it, Freddie as well. So he had like Chris Hemsworth and stuff, I believe, lined up for it, and Michael Phelps and stuff. I don't know. Anyway, it's quite cool.
What, uncle?
Yeah, that's no conversation. My only other thing on the sports I was going to mention, something else that popped up, just quickly get your knee-jerk response on it, because it was actually definitively a or not a sport, but I'll get your knee-jerk response on it. Bungee jumping.
It's an activity. What's the sport? It's just fun.
Exactly.
Well,
but people will say extreme sports, right?
You can get as low as possible, because there's that.
Exactly.
Is it tribe somewhere where to become a man you have to jump off this scaffolding structure?
That's on the Carl Pilkington. Carl Pilkington does the around the world thing, where he does the land diving onto. Yeah. But yeah, obviously, it's got not got a competitive element really, so it's not a sport at all. But
yeah,
when you hear extreme sports, you kind of think of skydiving and bungee jumping, right? Which obviously again,
it's just extreme.
Like skydiving to be more competitive, they could do more like flips and stuff. But I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting stuff.
Free diving.
Freediving, definitely, yeah.
Is it wide though?
He can go down the longest, and he can.
I guess, yeah. It's not as much of a spectator sport unless you have a camera. Like scuba gear, like, look, they're not breathing right now. Just a bubble of rings.
I always thought with the, this is again completely off topic, but because actually this is around again something that is a sport that kind of shouldn't be, in my opinion. Is Quidditch. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but just because of like the origins of it, just seemed too amusing to me. But that's
does it feel a bit too much like a role play game almost? It's like, that's make believe imaginary fun.
But it totally is a legit thing. Like it's a full on thing that universities do. There's a whole league outside of universities and everything. But it's mad. But yeah, the reason that made me think of that was the Harry Potter thing, where they have those like the games in Harry Potter, right? I think it's in the Goblet of Fire, right? It's the things. But like as a spectator sport, the second one where they just go into a lake and then go underwater, and the entire thing happens underwater. You're like, why is that a spectator sport? You thought that would be a good spectator sport?
Because everyone's just looking at their watch, being like, "Oh yeah, who's going to be next?" No one's come up yet. Oh, there's a body. Oh no.
Yeah, that's a good point. Never thought of that, because from the top views, there's nothing. There must be. I mean, to be fair, Formula One racing or something where you're there, it's just like. You just stood there. And you stood there. No. And then that's it, right? Yeah.
But you wait a few minutes and then it happens again. Yeah.
Although I've seen videos from the TT, and it just seems like even the spectacle is just seeing something move that fast. So like there's a video of a guy who's got like
that horizontal for TT
on his phone, and he's kind of like leaning out, like a bit naive to it, and it's like, oh, and you see this bike goes, and he like pushes. You can see the air pushes him back, and he's like in shock, like, oh, I didn't expect that. I nearly died. And it's just, and some of the speeds they go, and you can see in like the cameras of like
in the streets.
And it's just like these are houses and a shop. They're just like going 200 miles per hour past, and like So I think I'm assuming F1's the same. It's just being like, just seeing that speed and raw, like
the leading out of the top of the TTs. Yeah, so
we should all go. We should go to the TTs.
I know. A lot of people do it where like they'll just rent out the house, or even to the point of they'll rent out the front garden for people to camp in. They'll just be like, do you want to set up a tent? I'll charge you 50 quid, and like just
sign me up tomorrow night.
Yeah. Do we have anything more that's anyone want to fill in or add to before I wrap up? All right. So that wraps up this week's episode about sports. And a little fact to go with you is: do you know the name of a hashtag?
I feel like it's not ampersand. That's something else. That's the and thing, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go crisscross.
Tic-tac-toe. So apparently, Octothorpe, and I don't know where the name comes from, apart from in the 60s, it was I think it was a telephone company, and they say octo is because there's 8 ends.
There's 8 little points on it, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I was looking into it, and I was like, right, I'll just quickly just fact check this little fact I saw on the internet, and it's like, the symbol's been around for ages, and it's, it just seems like a commonplace symbol, and it's just used randomly, and like, originally it was a symbol for a pound sign, it's also called, as in like, pounds, LB, and it seems like there's a thing of Isaac Newton. He wrote LB in such a fashion it looks like the hashtag symbol. Hashtag itself comes from Twitter. That's where that name comes from. Yeah, it's been used for loads of things for loads of years, and it just seems it's a random.
Like I totally agree with you. I went down a rabbit hole once because I was just like, hang on a second, why do so many countries have a 5-pointed star on their flag? Oh, that's a whole rabbit hole. 5-pointed stars apparently in a lot of places, in a lot of history. Yeah, hashtag, now you think about it, 2 lines paralleled by 2 other lines through them, kind of, you can imagine it pops up a lot. Yeah, so some people say, it's because it's from music and it's actually a sharp. Other things, in my head, and this is something which is like, that makes sense, because phones used it for like, so when they had like the keypads, you'd have the little symbol at the bottom. And I thought, is that because it's maybe phones, the Octothorpe came from phones in the 60s, and actually it's like a little grid of a phone pad, because you can fit 9 numbers in there. It's not that at all. That's just a happy little coincidence. Well, it used to be circles, right?
Oh yeah, it was after that, I think. Well, then again, looking it up, it just said telephones used it. I don't know what telephones looked like in the 60s. Were they still a little run around ones?
What a great ending to a sports episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like it, but what?
It's just
there you go.
If anyone wants
to
go down a rabbit hole and email us what you think of what's the hashtag, where did it come from? I don't even know. Oh yeah, I tried to come up with a little fact. Yeah, we're gonna get so many people.
Yeah, I think it's fine. If people are still listening at the end of an episode, then
if you're still listening now, you either
well, you can start with a little. Am I the could you say donkey hole? I feel it sounds worse, donkey hole. Donkey hole. But it's like, am I the donkey hole? And it's like,
am I the donkey orifice? Is that me?
It's a bit too descriptive. It's like, it's almost more suggestive than saying the word itself. Am I the donkey hole?
I remember my grandma having, you're not even sure where I'm going right now, having these weird rubber white circle things that were kind of cut into a few ways so that you could push kitchen towels into them, like drying cloths. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Have I seen that?
I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
I have seen that.
Yeah, and I remember being like a kid and I was like, what's that? And she's like, it's a cat's bum hole. And I absolutely wet myself. I think for like half an hour. It was the funniest thing I've ever heard. And I'm still laughing now to this day.
Yeah.
I still push tea towels into cat's bums whenever I see them.
You can picture it though, right? That's exactly what it is. It's cat's bum.
Yeah, fully. That's really funny. So that rounds up this episode. So hopefully, it's probably going to be the shortest first half, but good discussion. That's it. I don't know if I want to end it more than that. Thanks. Thanks. Goodbye. Oh yeah. I've been Johnny, your host. We've had a thank you to Freddie and a thank you to Alistair. Thank you and goodbye.
I'd just like to have a mention of the charity Team Telomere. Their mission is to provide information and support services for families worldwide affected by dyskeratosis congenita and telomere biology disorders, to encourage the medical community's research in finding causes and effective treatments, and to facilitate improved diagnosis by educating medical providers. You can go to the website teamtelomere.org to find out more. Thanks for listening to No Idea Yet. If you like the show, you can also follow us on Instagram. It's No Idea Yet Podcast. And if you have any comments, information you thought we missed, or recommendations for the future, drop us an email on noideayetpodcast@gmail.com. Stay tuned every Saturday when we drop a new episode. And thank you for listening.